Hello, welcome back to another breaking news update. My name is Jimmy Boyd, and you were watching Boyd News. I want to thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm back with some more updates coming out from the war between Russia and Ukraine, and I've got some big updates to share with you here today. We're going to start off with this story that you see here on your screen, as a North Korean flag has appeared in a photo next to a Russian flag in a newly captured village. This is in the Donetsk region on the eastern side of Ukraine, not too far away from Pokrovsk, in the village of Sukernie. Okay, so hopefully I'm pronouncing that name right. I apologize if I am not. But again, this is in the Donetsk region, not too far away from Pokrovsk. And Pokrovsk, we've been talking a lot about that city recently. It's been, for the most part, evacuated, and the Ukrainians are desperately trying to hold on to that city. It's a key rail and transport hub for the Ukrainians. And if they end up losing Pokrovsk, it could definitely make it very difficult for the Ukrainians to hold the Donetsk region as a whole. So this is not too far away. It's just a little bit southeast, very close to the city of Ukrainsk. You probably heard me mention that city a few times now. Ukrainsk fell to the Russians, I believe, somewhere about a month or a little bit longer. About a month ago or so is when we last heard that the Russians took over Ukrainsk, and this village is not too far away from there. So it looks like the Russians are steadily advancing on the Eastern Front, especially in the Donetsk region, very close to Pokrovsk, is where we have been hearing that the Russians are advancing. And this picture actually popped up on Russian Z channels on Telegram. So the authenticity of this picture is still being verified at this time, but many Russian Z channels were sharing this, supposedly showing a North Korean flag next to a Russian flag atop a hill in the newly captured village of Sukernie. Okay, so we're going to talk more about that today, and I've got more pictures to kind of show you where this is located at. And then we're also going to discuss that the fact that we had U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin showing up in Kiev today, making an unannounced visit, and we had a $400 million aid package being given to Ukraine today. We'll discuss the details for that. And then we also heard some reports of the city of Zaporizhzhia coming under glide bomb attacks once again today. So I've got some video and pictures coming out from there. We have some devastation and some people that have been injured, and I think even some may have been killed. So very unfortunate situation for the Ukrainians down there. So let's go ahead and hop into the news, guys. I've got several topics we're going to discuss today. We're going to start off with North Korea, though, as I've got more updates coming out in regards to the North Koreans joining this war. Okay, so from Jason J. Smart, says here a North Korean flag near Surkino in the Pokrovsky direction. Ukrainian news: North Korea in league with Russia is invading a European country, and complete silence from the West. Our enemies have no fear of the West's reaction. Our enemies should fear us. Okay, so that's obviously a huge topic right now, is that if the North Koreans are confirmed to be fighting inside of Ukraine, which we've been hearing lots of reports about that, then this means that North Korea would be essentially invading a European nation. And how is the West going to respond to that? What is NATO going to do? How are they going to escalate the war on their end? If Russia's going to escalate, how is the West and NATO going to respond? That's definitely a huge topic right now. So this picture here has like a map that kind of shows us where supposedly this flag was spotted at. Okay, so this I know it's in Russian, so it's very hard to understand if you don't speak Russian. But I believe this is the city of Donetsk right here. Okay, so just a little bit to the west is where this town is located. And then I believe this town right here is Pokrovsk. Okay, so it's just a little bit southeast. Probably I'd say maybe 20 to 40 kilometers southeast of Pokrovsk. It's not too far away, is where this photo was taken at, supposedly. Okay, so some people are saying it may have been photoshopped. It could be used as propaganda. We'll talk about that here on our next post. But obviously it's still being or we're still trying to figure out the authenticity, of this photo. So it says right here, NOAA reports after a photo surfaced online showing a North Korean flag near Sukernie, Donetsk region. Andriy Kovalenko, head of the Center for Countering Disinformation, warned that Russia is trying to amplify the North Korean narrative as fear propaganda. There will be stories about flags, regardless of whether they were hung somewhere or photoshopped and how long they have been hanging. Okay, so is it possible this is just Russian propaganda? Maybe there actually isn't North Korean troops inside of Ukraine. I mean, we've had reports stating that we had some officers that were killed just about a week or so ago. I reported that to you guys, that some North Korean officers were killed in eastern Ukraine. This was according to Ukrainian intelligence. And we haven't had any actual like North Korean troops that are captured or anything like that. So it's really hard to tell. But this was the original post from Kovalenko on Telegram stating that, okay, that this could be Russia disinformation, that they could be doing this to spread fear. And obviously, the West right now is panicking. And then we even have South Korea panicking right now. And there's lots of tension stirring up on the Korean Peninsula in regards to this. And we're going to talk more about that as we move on. So we also have this update from the Kiev Independent. Seoul summons Russian envoy over North Korean troops deployment. South Korea called for the immediate withdrawal of North Korean troops and sternly warned that it will respond with every possible means to threats to its interests. Okay, so that's what I mean. So even on the South Korean peninsula right now, or on the Korean peninsula, excuse me, South Korea is even panicking as well. And they've been warning North Korea about sending their troops over there because there's already been issues about North Korea sending weapons, but when they're sending troops, a completely different story. This is actually active involvement of North Korea joining the war with Russia. So obviously, South Korea is worried about that. So they summoned the Russian envoy over the North Korean troop deployment, according to this information, and also calling for the immediate withdrawal of North Korean troops. Okay, so obviously, South Korea is warning North Korea in regards to these troops over here fighting on behalf of Russia. Okay, so military news UA. South Korea is considering sending 155 millimeter shells to the Ukrainian armed forces as a pressure measure in response to the dispatch of North Korean troops to Russia. So I did try to research this. I found a few small publications talking about this, that South Korea is considering sending these 155 millimeter shells. They haven't done so yet, but we've heard this a few times coming out from South Korea, that they would think about starting to send these weapons over to Ukraine, but then they would basically cancel last minute in regards to sending them. But apparently, the South Koreans are heavily considering sending these shells over to Ukraine in response to North Korean troops supposedly showing up on Russian territory. Okay, so we already know that the North Koreans have been training inside of eastern Russia, preparing to potentially join the front line in eastern Ukraine. That's obviously South Korea's response to that. Okay, so also from Max 24, Russia's detained 18 North Korean soldiers who voluntarily left their positions in the Kursk region, Romansky, with reference to sources in the GUR. They can be involved now in assault actions against the AFU. Okay, so what's being reported here is I believe this could be tied to the same story that we heard just about maybe 3 or 4 days ago. I reported to you guys that there were somewhere around 16 to 18 North Korean soldiers that had basically fled from their positions in the Kursk region. They were supposedly deployed over there to fight against the Ukrainians in the Kursk region with that offensive that the Ukrainians opened up in the Kursk region. And supposedly some of them had fled and ran away from their positions. Looks like they may have been detained and caught if this is that same group of soldiers that had fled previously. And looks like they could be deployed to the front line. It wouldn't surprise me that that's how they would be punished, is pushed straight to the front line. Maybe they were in some sort of secondary or some sort of reserve positions in the background, probably to relieve some of the reserve soldiers from the Russians to put them on the front line. So it looks like we could potentially be seeing some of these North Korean soldiers engaged in combat with the Ukrainians in the Kursk region. Now, are they inside of eastern Ukraine? Potentially as well, but we haven't had any official confirmation of any actual on-the-ground combat between Ukrainians and North Korean soldiers, but it's very possible we could be hearing about that in the Kursk region very soon. So also, from next, North Korea may have sent one of the world's most brutal special forces guarding dictator Kim Jong-un's father to fight against Ukraine, says the Bild publication. The publication calls them combat slaves because they grew up in an information vacuum without internet, communication, telephones, and Western TV. The future soldiers were treated with ideology, preparing them to destroy the devils of NATO and the enemies of the beloved leader. Okay, so supposedly the Bild publication coming out and reporting that these North Korean troops could potentially be heavily trained and like special forces. We've heard of that 1,500 special forces from North Korea were sent over to Russia. And this is some pictures coming out from North Korea's state media showing some of their soldiers being trained. Apparently, many of them don't even watch TV or have any access to internet. And supposedly they could be, very aggressive and dangerous soldiers for the Ukrainians to fight up against. So definitely some interesting information coming out from here as well. Also from Max 24, Zelensky says if the world remains silent now and if we have to face soldiers from North Korea on the front as constantly as we have to defend ourselves against shaheeds, then it will certainly not benefit anyone in the world and will only prolong this war. Okay, so obviously, with the Ukrainian or the North Koreans, excuse me, joining this fight, this is obviously an expansion of this war. This is another nation now getting directly involved, and then we already know, as it says here, that the Shahed drones are being used. These come from Iran, so Ukraine is defending themselves from multiple nations right now. Okay, they're defending themselves from Russia. They're defending themselves from North Korean troops now, potentially that could be on the front line very soon. If not, maybe they already are. And then we have Iranian Shahed drones that are flying into Ukraine consistently. And I showed you guys video footage recently of some of these Shahed drones that are literally the size of a house. So we have gigantic drones flying into Ukraine consistently, okay? And Ukraine has to defend themselves from hundreds of these sometimes every night. And then we also have reports recently of the Chinese being more heavily involved in this war. And although the Chinese are trying to project themselves as being in the middle here and neutral when it comes to this war, we're hearing more and more reports that lots of equipment comes from China and then is sent over to Russia, and then they manufacture a lot of the weapons that eventually are fired into Ukraine. Okay, so Ukraine is essentially defending themselves from multiple countries around the world, whether it be troops or whether it be equipment and weapons being sent to Russia and then eventually flying into Ukraine. Okay, so very crazy situation. So now we're going to move on. I've got this update here from Volodymyr Zelensky today. It says we held a meeting with Minister of Defense Rustem Umerov, Commander-in-Chief Oleksandr Syrsky, and Chief of General Staff Anatoly Barilevich. I'm not sure how to say that, guys. Sorry. Our primary focus was the front line, military objectives, and steps for the near future, including everything necessary for our warriors, effective actions on the front at the front lines, weapons, military equipment, supplies, and brigade manning. Commander-in-Chief Syrsky provided a detailed report on the situation across all battlefronts and our efforts to repel enemy attacks. The Kursk operation was discussed separately, where we are holding our positions, preventing the enemy from expanding the war onto our land. Instead of the buffer zone on Ukrainian territory planned by the Russians, we have created a buffer zone on Russian territory near our border. I am grateful to all our warriors for their bravery. Special emphasis is placed on replenishing the exchange fund for Ukraine to free our people from Russian captivity. Thanks to the Kursk operation, a significant number of our people have already been released. Following today's meeting, we have updated the task for negotiations for our partners regarding defense support for Ukraine. Okay, so here's a picture of their meeting that they were holding. So he obviously talked about different things here. He discussed obviously the Kursk operation, stating that they're basically happy that they have this operation going over there right now, as it's preventing any new buffer zones opening up on their land. And then he also mentioned here a lot about the exchange fund, which is them capturing Russian troops primarily, is what we've been hearing in the Kursk region, which is allowing them to exchange many of their soldiers that have been captured by the Russians. And we just heard, I think it was on Saturday, that we had a 95 for 95 prisoner swap between Russia and Ukraine. So obviously big developments coming from here. And obviously they're still trying to figure out how they're going to move forward with this war and then potentially hopefully end this war by next year, okay? So just some updates coming out from Volodymyr Zelensky there. Then we had this report today from Kiev Post. Pentagon Chief Austin arrived in Kiev on an unannounced visit. So this is a picture of him right here. This is Lloyd Austin, the U.S. Secretary of Defense. And when he arrived, he opened up with a aid package for Ukraine, 400 million military aid package reported here from Max 24, ammunition for HIMARS, 155 millimeter and 105 millimeter artillery ammunition, 60 millimeter, 81 millimeter, and 120 millimeter mortar shells and shells, systems and shells, Javelin and AT-4 anti-tank systems, M113 APCs, those are armored personnel carriers, satellite communication equipment, small arms and ammunition, grenades and training equipment, equipment for carrying out demolition work and ammunition, equipment for the protection of critical national infrastructure, spare parts, auxiliary equipment, services, training, and transportation. Okay, so looks like a pretty significant aid package once again being announced for Ukraine. And we heard from Volodymyr Zelensky just last week that they were expecting to receive multiple aid packages by the end of the year. So it looks like yet again another major aid package. I think we just had one announced last week as well, and looks like we have yet again another one, a pretty heavy aid package for Ukraine that has been announced by the United States. Then we also heard from Vicegrad 24. France announces it will send 12 additional Caesar self-propelled howitzers to Ukraine, funded by 300 million euros in interest from frozen Russian assets. The military aid package also includes 155 millimeter artillery shells, Aster surface to air missiles, AASM hammer guided bombs, rocket launchers, and Mistral short range air defense systems. Okay, so yet another pretty heavy package as well coming from France. And looks like a large part of this is going to be 12 additional Caesar self propelled howitzers going to Ukraine. Okay, so here's a picture of one of those systems there. So yet another pretty heavy aid package going to Ukraine as well. Now we're going to move on to this update from Nexta. Breaking: Russians shot 2 Ukrainian POWs. Russian occupiers have shot 2 captured Ukrainian armed forces soldiers in the Selidovo district. The office of the prosecutor general of Ukraine has reported. Okay, so this is not too far away from Pokrovsk as well, very close to that town of Sukerny, where we saw that North Korean flag, not too far away from there as well. The war criminals put the captives face down, pinning them to the ground with their feet, and then shot them at point blank range with automatic weapons. Okay, so this is apparently a picture coming out. I know it's very blurry. Unfortunately, I won't be able to show you guys the actual video footage, but this was a picture apparently from that event. And yet again, another report, probably the 5th or 10th report that I have shown here on this channel of supposedly Russian troops executing Ukrainian soldiers. Okay, these are soldiers who had surrendered to the Russians, that were unarmed at the time that they were shot, and they were killed in captivity. Okay, so very crazy to continue to have to hear that, and very sad for the Ukrainian soldiers. Okay, so also from Bliskovka, today, one of the 2 power lines at Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant went down, reports Energy Minister Herman Halushenko. In case of disconnection from the external power supply, another complete blackout will occur at Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which poses a threat to radiation safety. Okay, so this is very dangerous. We've heard of this happening several times now, where we had power lines going down. Sometimes this is due to drone attacks or even shelling. Sometimes even artillery has caused some of these power lines to shut down at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. And if the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant ends up losing power, it could obviously lead to a meltdown. The reactors could overheat if the cooling ponds do not continue to keep this thing cooling down. Then obviously we could have a major nuclear event over here. Okay, so this is something that Bliskovka was warning about today with this report, and hopefully they're able to get the power back on. We've heard this happen at least 3 or 4 times, I want to say, over the last couple months, and each time they were able to get the power back on. So hopefully that will be the case soon. And obviously a very dangerous situation. So hopefully we don't have some sort of nuclear event over here, but definitely the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant has been targeted multiple times, whether it be Ukrainians or Russians, most of the time being reported by the Russians, but every now and then the Russians accuse Ukraine of attacking it as well. So very dangerous situation. Hopefully they resolve that. Next to reports, Ukrainian intelligence has reported the elimination of the Russian war criminal involved in the barbaric strike on a shopping center in Kremenchuk. Dmitry Golenkov, a pilot of the 52nd Heavy Bomber Aviation Regiment of the Russian Air Force, was found dead in the village of Suponevo in the Bryansk region. He had been beaten to death with a hammer to the head. Golenkov was chief of staff of the aviation squadron, which is based in the Shaikovka airfield and has Tu-22 M3 bombers in service. He was involved in the strike on the Omster shopping center in Kremenchuk, which killed 22 people. Also, Golenkov is responsible for a missile strike on a residential building in Dnipro in January 14th, 2024, when 46 civilian Ukrainians were killed, among them 6 children, the main directorate of intelligence of Ukraine said. So unfortunately, I won't be able to show you guys the video here. I think it's a little too graphic, but we have a photo of him here. This is a picture of this man. And yeah, apparently he had been found dead in the village of Suponevo in the Bryansk region, okay, just a little bit north of Ukraine, very close to the Kursk region. So who exactly killed this man, we don't really know. But who knows? Maybe it was Ukrainians, or maybe it happened to be some Russians. No one really knows here. We don't have that information. But yeah, apparently he was involved in a major strike on a shopping center in Kremenchuk. which is in the Poltava region. I believe I have covered this. I've covered multiple shopping centers on the eastern side of Ukraine that have been targeted. So this sounds like a shopping center that I have covered before, as we have had multiple reports of shopping centers on the eastern side being destroyed and many times people being killed and wounded in these strikes. So that was a huge report coming out today. Also from the Kiev Independent, Ukraine's new Sting drone designed to hunt Shaheeds, Telegraph reports. According to developers, Sting will be able to fly up to 10,000 feet with a speed of over 100 miles per hour. It is the first drone specifically developed to target Shaheeds. So here's a photo of one of these drones. I believe this is actually an Iranian Shahed drone, if I'm not mistaken. So I think they just used a picture of this Shahed drone, and maybe they don't have an actual photo of these drones being used yet. I'm not sure, or maybe they just built one very similar to a Shahed drone. I'm not really sure. But apparently some new Sting drones have been designed by the Ukrainians that they can use to take down Iranian drones, okay? So big news coming out from Ukraine there. Also moving on, we've got a video here to show you from Jay in Kiev. Russians just tried to massacre a shopping center full of families on a busy Saturday evening by sending two 500-kilogram guided bombs, but both missed, only blowing up neighboring buildings and a parking lot. Is there anything as disgusting as Russia? Okay, so Jay in Kiev, obviously a major supporter of Ukraine, and that's why he's speaking very aggressively towards Russia here. I've shown a lot of his reports, but we've got a video here that's 24 seconds, and you can see in the background behind this shopping center massive smoke, as looks like we had at least one or two guided aerial bombs that were dropped near this shopping center. So we're going to have a lot of people that were heading out of this shopping center as these explosions were taking place, and people were kind of freaking out. So go ahead and take a look at this.
Ебать, только что, короче, прилет. Я охуел, блядь. Пиздец, блядь. Такой жесткий, блядь. Надо, короче, уебывать отсюда. Ну его нахуй. Ебать, ебать, он, смотри. Они хотели, видно, по эпицентру, блядь, я как раз тут был, блядь. Прикинь. И промазали чуть-чуть, ебать. Ебать, только что.
All right, so very scary, right? So to my understanding, some people in the comments were claiming that this could have been in the Zaporizhzhia region, which makes a lot of sense because I have another report of Zaporizhzhia coming under attack as well. And then we also had that report of some of the power lines being damaged. So it looks like Zaporizhzhia region was really under attack a lot just last night. And this could be where that was located. Very sad to see. There was even somebody carrying their child there. So very dangerous situation for the Ukrainians. We had this report too from the Ukrainian Review. Russia's hit a kindergarten in Zaporizhzhia. 4 people were injured. 2 of them were rescued by rescuers from under the rubble. State Emergency Service reported. Here's some pictures of that strike. We had a kindergarten coming under attack as well in Zaporizhzhia again. So like I said, I think we had a major attack on Zaporizhzhia last night, as obviously multiple areas were targeted. I'm not sure if this school was very close to that shopping center. It's really hard to tell if it was, but these are some pictures coming out. This is obviously a separate attack. It looks like this building took a direct hit. So very crazy to see this, guys, and very sad. Looks like somebody was being rescued here as well. So very unfortunate situation. Okay, also we're going to move on now to Joni Oskola. Says 113, despite its full commitment, Russia's year-long offensive has failed to meet its objectives. Progress is unlikely to become easier in the future as challenges continue to accumulate. So the reason why I wanted to show you this is actually very true, okay? Over the last year, what we have really seen on the eastern front of Ukraine is the Russians have made some gains, but then also lost some gains at the same time. But for the most part, what we have seen over the last year in the eastern side of Ukraine, as you can see here from October 1st, 2023 to October 1st, 2024, is not really too much movement of the front line, right? It's for the most part the same. The only real difference we see is kind of right here. There's a small little blip, maybe a few tens of kilometers that Russia has taken, but for the most part, imagine the amount of losses they have taken just over the last year to gain almost no territory inside of Ukraine, at least compared to what they have taken over the last maybe 2 years prior, right? So definitely a major update coming out from Joni that I wanted to share with you guys to kind of show you how much land Russia has taken in just the last year, which is very incremental, okay? Not too much at all. Okay, so also moving on now to the Ukrainian Review once again, as Russia escalates its aggression, The question is no longer whether Ukraine should be allowed to strike deep into Russian territory, but when. The time to lift restrictions is long overdue. Okay, so we've obviously been talking a lot about this lately on whether Ukraine can strike deep inside of Russian territory or not and use Western made missiles like some of the British Storm Shadow or Scalp missiles, and then also U.S. ATACMS missiles. And obviously, the West has so far not allowed them the ability to do so, right? But at what point will they be able to do this? When will the restrictions be lifted, and when will Ukraine be able to strike inside of Russia? Now, obviously, with the North Koreans joining the fight, that is a potential there that I could see maybe the West at some point, especially if the Eastern Front really starts to collapse. Maybe the West could lift restrictions and allow them to strike targets. I think this will be more of a last resort type thing. Maybe the West doesn't feel like Ukraine's at their last resort just yet. Obviously, the Western Front, for the most part, is holding, but let's see what happens when the North Korean troops start to show up, and then we have tens of thousands of Russian troops that could be potentially showing up as well if they get relieved on the back end with some of their reserves that get moved to the front. That's very possible. So just wanted to share that with you today. Finally, one last thing to show you here from Bliskovka. This is how the Russians terrorize Ukrainians every night with such plywood UAVs. Okay, so we've talked about this before. Russia's been producing a lot of these cheaply made drones that are literally made out of plywood, sometimes styrofoam. Here's a picture of one of them right here. We've got a closer up photo as well. As you can clearly see, these are some sort of like styrofoam or plywood, very cheaply made drones that are very light, and then I would even think probably would even be a little bit difficult to detect, considering that they're just made out of wood, and they're probably a lot less dense as well. Okay, so here's a few more photos of it, of some Ukrainian soldiers that found some of these UAV drones that were being used, most likely in eastern Ukraine. There's another picture of that as well. So obviously Russia's using a lot of different types of drones. They get a lot of drones from Iran. They produce them themselves. And, obviously lots of different types of drones are being used inside of Ukraine. So just some updates to share with you guys on what's happening over here with the war between Russia and Ukraine. But that's going to be it for today's update. I hope you got something out of this. If you did, please smash that like button. Also, if you enjoy my content, please consider subscribing down below. Hit the notification bell. That way YouTube can notify you. And with that, hope you all have a great day. Everybody take care and God bless. And we'll see you in the next one.